Hello readers! Yes, I want to do something a little bit different for this video. One of those video essays that the kids have been doing for like the past 5 years. About something on the internet, which has annoyed me. Perish the thought. I want to do a video about what's getting me riled up about Danny Dyer's royal family. And because I'm not clever enough to have based my YouTube persona about a cartoon face that I couldn't just voice over, I've had to bring myself all the way to Buckingham Palace to do this episode. Oh yes, wait, no expense. Look at my royal Joanna. Wait, God. I know that having not watched TV since about 2011, and that's not a boast, by the way, I'm just a bit too lazy to watch full programmes anymore. I'm not really its target audience. What's wrong, you might say, of just using a celebrity man to get people to engage with history? Cheer up, you miserable git. Well, I mean, yes, I would just completely ignore the programme, but the one thing that really gets me riled up is this whole direct descendant stuff. And I think that the misrepresentation of history, genetics and ancestry is just really bad and actually downright dangerous. But we'll get to that right at the end.
This new show indulges Mr. Dyer by constantly flattering his understanding that he is directly descended from Edward III.
I want to indulge in it. I want to indulge, smell it.
While he does hilarious things like call individuals geezer.
I'm meeting a clever Scandinavian geezer called Soren.
Refer to palaces as gaffs.
What a gaff.
And, well, not much else really, because he's not really a very funny man. But whatever, if you do find him funny, then I suppose you'll enjoy the show. And if you learn who the hell Louis IX was at the same time, well, good on you. Because plenty of time is given to proper experts who know what they're talking about, and it's all pretty well researched and shot as you'd expect from wall-to-wall productions. Apart from the usual art historical boner of using artistic representations of medieval individuals as actual portraits.
Anxiety across his face, but that would definitely mean we're related. You know, I've had my anxious moments in the past.
There's nothing wrong with this new series except the premise. First presented in a 2016 episode of Wall to Wall's Who Do You Think You Are, which is never questioned or explained to the audience.
So what's the deal? Is Danny Dyer actually descended from royalty? Well, yes. But is that actually significant in any way? And what is a direct descendant?
But first, some of you might ask, like me, who the hell is Danny Dyer and where did he come from? Well, if you do know, or you don't care, then you can skip ahead to this time code and we'll see you there. Well, after lots of bit parts on telly, Danny was in Trainspotting knockoff Human Traffic in 1999. Much like we have Alan Bennett to blame for James Corden, Danny got a big break in the theatre in a production of No Man's Land with Harold Bloody Pinter.
Point out, by the way, I actually own a copy of this play. Yes, look at how fucking cultured I am. The thing about Harold Pinter plays is that they are basically about horrible men being twats to each other. So I'm pretty sure Danny Dyer really shone in it.
And he went on to get a lot of hard man roles in the arse end of the "It's a right royal cockney barrel of monkeys" gritty Brit flick scene. He was also in a spectacularly unfunny film version of the comic play Run for Your Wife, which when it came out in 2013 grossed £602 in its opening weekend.
And I'm kind of surprised that he's as big as he is now, because I remember just at the end of the noughties when he was just a huge joke, just presenting cheap Sky One programmes about top 10 hardest apes.
So I guess it was joining EastEnders. Yes, apparently EastEnders is still bloody on, who knew? That made him a national treasure, which is a rather problematic title these days, I guess. Like some rather dubious people have held it. Anyway, this national treasure is now often on daytime TV, swearing inappropriately.
Twat David Cameron who
you
called it...
can't say that, Daddy, that's a rude word. And trending on Twitter because the kids are screaming about him making comments about sheep masturbating. He was bound to appear on the BBC's light entertainment celeb-centric mega programme Who Do You Think You Are sooner or later, and he actually turned out to be the season premiere of its 2016 series. Now, I've watched all this, so you don't have to endure all of it.
My baby.
Find out how precisely this whole direct descendant of Edward III works.
The opening 25 minutes of this show really aren't that bad, despite the fact that we're treated to far too many shots of Danny Dyer's arse, because he's crammed his lower body into some pants which are ludicrously over small for him, and he walks around like one of those very rare shots when you get of all of Kermit the Frog's body walking. It's bizarrely unnatural.
And he ignores his mother's side for the entirety of the show and starts off by chatting to his old man, I imagine that's his name for his father, not his penis, in a boozer where they have keg instead of the fine cask ales on offer. And this actually is more annoying than all the wrong information that his father gives Danny, which isn't really corrected later. It's only like if you're actually watching it like me, you see that most of the stuff he says is actually total rubbish.
Yeah, so take this photograph of his great-great-great-grandparents, Albert and Anne Buttevant. His father says that they owned Workhouse in Mile End and that the picture's taken in 1851. Now, the thing that really sets me off there is a photograph from 1851. That's insane. And of course it is, because 1851 is actually Albert's birth date, and this picture was almost certainly taken in the early 20th century, judging from their age. And yes, the show doesn't really say he was wrong, but we do find out that actually they were in and out of the workhouse in the 1870s, not running it.
After more shots of his arse and a fine one of his genitals, presuming that's not a cucumber wrapped in tinfoil that he shoved down there, he discovers the touching story of how his great-great-grandmother Mary Ann, at the age of 17, was convicted of concealing a birth. That's that she gave birth without a midwife and her child died. Amazingly, she went on to live until the 1960s, and her daughter, Danny's great-grandmother, is still alive, and he can share this secret that her mother, who went on to deliver many babies for the rest of her life, held the whole time.
Now, I think that this is actually quite interesting television, if you like that sort of thing, but it is nonetheless real family history, real ties to people in the past, the tragedies of which still do have real repercussions on people alive today.
However, this makes Danny feel sad, so they get some shots of him looking glum at a canal. Danny doesn't like feeling sad, so now we get to the Deus Ex Machina moment of him meeting an expert genealogist in her kooky-quirky open-plan flat that's probably worth about £1 million to tell him what he wants to hear. She presents him with a family tree on posh paper in nice writing.
A lot of people do ask in family history, how far back have you got? Now, that's not really the point about it, but if you really do want to get as far back as you can, you'll usually hit a brick wall at the beginning of the 19th century, because the 1841 census is really the first survey of its kind. There are censuses done in the years before, but they're just nowhere near as useful. You really do have to start going back into parish records, ordering documents, doing lots of research and potentially spending quite a lot of money as well as time on just a very tedious process of elimination to find just basically names.
Of course, Danny's a geezer with no time for that sort of old shite. Someone's just going to do it for him. And the genealogist has found that his 5 times great-grandfather married into the Gosnold family, so he can use that man's wife to go up to Robert Gosnold, which means there's a diversion to learn all about the Civil War in Oxford. Now let's stop a minute here.
Oh, this is a very old pub, the oldest pub in Oxford. But why?
Well, we've now reached, in the mid-17th century, the 12th generation of Danny Dyer's ancestry. Now, you know how a family tree works. You have 2 parents. They all have 2 parents each, the 4 grandparents that gave you presents at Christmas. Now, you probably wouldn't have known them all, but your grandparents would also have had 2 parents each, your 8 great-grandparents. Now, this grows exponentially. 16, great-great-grandparents. 32 great-great-64 128 great-256 great-grandparents 512 great-grandparents 1204 4096 Now, at the top of Danny's family tree, at this point, if the whole thing was drawn out, there would be 4,096 people that he is just as strongly descended from as Robert Gosnold.
Now this is why direct descendant doesn't really make any sense, except if you use it in a hereditary way, like first son, first son, first son, first son. But if we're talking just purely genetic ancestry, it is entirely meaningless. You are either a descendant of someone or you are not. You can be related to someone, but you wouldn't say you are indirectly descended from your cousin. No, you're related to your cousin. There is no such thing as direct, and this is the worst thing that this programme always pushes.
So for all Danny harps on about this dude being his grandpa, he shares essentially 0.0002% of his blood with him, as far as that's a meaningful statement, which it isn't really. Going down the most promising family line whenever you feel about it is not really working out your ancestry, and showing it as the one true path of Danny's past is extremely misleading. As an aside, Danny has a rather strange view of ancestry. You know in Back to the Future 3, where they meet Biff's great-grandfather and he's played by the same actor as Biff?
Well, looky what we have here. Looky what we have here.
Like, it's a comic contrivance, so that they can keep the same antagonist in another setting, and they always do it in cartoons as well. But I think Danny might actually think that he's reincarnated as a different royal geezer in each generation before him. But the interesting thing is, how quickly can they get from this lower rank gentry to a higher rank and eventually into the royal family? I'm actually surprised by how long it takes. The Gosnold family married into the higher rank Tolmash family the generation before. And the Tolmash's very interesting connection is that they married the great-granddaughter of Thomas Cromwell. This gives Danny a wonderful excuse to say embarrassing cockney things at Hampton Court, and be flattered by saying he looks like this portrait of Cromwell by Holbein, when he doesn't. Cromwell, if you remember the beginning of Wolf Hall, came pretty much from nothing.
Now get up.
But as he became very important in Henry VIII's court, his issue went on to become quite important.
I'm sort of the Earl of Essex.
No, you're not the Earl of Essex. Anyway, he stopped being the Earl of Essex, so it wasn't even hereditary to his son.
Yep, by descent.
I think it's going to change me as a human being.
Anyway, the thing is that Cromwell, even though he's executed, his son marries into the Seymour family, and that really is the thing that once you get into a very important family like that, you know, Jane Seymour, one of Henry VIII's wives, you can quite quickly get into the royal family, and they do at Edward III, who is, yes, Danny Dyer's great 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 grandfather.
That does sound quite impressive, doesn't it? And it is so hilarious when he tells for us plebs to get off his drive of his actually quite surprisingly tatty looking house. I guess it's not his. Dunno. Let's have a look at this thing he shows his missus. You know this isn't a family tree. This is just one of many millions of equally strong lines of descent running through a family tree, where someone's always just chased up the most promising looking surname. If it was a family tree, at the top, along with Edward III, would potentially be 16,777,215 other people. Now that's more than 3 times the population in medieval England.
I mean, anyone with English ancestry is, statistically, very, very likely by the mid-14th century going to be directly descended from the king. It's just really an almost statistical certainty. In fact, Danny Dyer is probably related to one of the later monarchs, so you don't have to go back as far in his family tree. It's the documenting that is difficult. It is the proving an almost complete certainty.
Family, my 26 times great-grandfather, Louis IX.
268,435,455 other individuals, which actually is more than twice the population of Europe at the time. We can see that the exponential model doesn't really take account of how family trees overlap with each other when you've got common ancestry, inbreeding and all that sort of thing. And you get to the more interesting idea, not of how Danny is particularly special, but how we're all related, and how our ancestry is much more diverse than just being a king. But we don't care about that. We just want to tell him he's important. We're a mix of so much. We are not just pure-bred Anglo-Saxon warriors.
And this is when I get to the bit where I think there's a little bit of danger hidden in here, something that I really don't like, something that doesn't sit well with me. This whole blood thing. Because yes, I don't really think that anybody watching this actually believes that Danny Dyer is like nearly an heir to the throne. They will just take away that he is, in a way, distantly related to Edward III, but they won't understand that is statistically almost certain anyway. What I don't like is the idea that his bloodline makes him partly who he is, the importance of bloodlines in defining who we are. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter where you came from. Because really, when you start tracing all these bloodlines and actually thinking there's something significant to them, the sort of person you are, I think that's really where scary, scary blood and soil nationalism lies. Now, I'm not saying that Danny Dyer is as bad as Adolf Hitler.
So, Robert,
Not another bloody pleb! My legs! My legs!